What's up, guys? Welcome to WaiGuo Friends English. This is Amber and Josh. This is our first video on YouTube, so we're just going to do an introduction of who we are, our teaching experience, our teaching methodology. We're an English teaching business, and let's just start sharing our teaching experience.
Yeah, so when I was in high school and junior high, I was super shy. I didn't know what to do with my hands or how to enunciate my voice or project my voice. And so I was really, really shy. I didn't really like being around people. Public speaking class was the worst. But when I went to university, I started tutoring a person, international student, one-on-one. And it was really satisfying because his eyes were just so open all the time. Anything where I could teach him, even if it was silly things or crazy things or very grammar rule and very serious technical stuff, he loved it. He loved every second of it because he needed to know. He was there to learn English. And so for me, I started there. But then when we graduated, we went to China to live there and teach in a Chinese university. And that was like getting thrown to the deep end of the pool. It was a lot. It was 30 to 50 students per class and about 8 to 10 classes a week. And so for a person who was still quite shy, it was really hard for me, but I learned to actually really love it because just being able to see my students' face and hear their screams when I scare them, it was wonderful. It was awesome.
This guy would go into his class every morning. Okay, every morning, every class. He would go in there through the back and just scream at the top of his lungs, and everybody would freak out. They would scream because he scared them, right? I don't know how it continued to work every day, every class, but it was kind of useful to me because when I got to my room, I would know that he got to his room because across the building, I could hear faint screams from his students. So it was ridiculous.
I was infamously known as the crazy English teacher on campus.
Yes, 100%. I did not jump scare my students. I was known as the nice one.
Well, nice in all but her grades.
I was harsher in grades. Yeah, you're right.
But before that, you had lots of other teaching experience that I really did not have.
Yeah, I was homeschooled growing up, and my parents, to get us involved, my brothers involved in other things, they signed us up for martial arts. And I took martial arts and I ran with it. I did martial arts for 8 years. 6 of those years, I was an instructor. And a few of those years, I had my own school in a city by myself. So it was really fun. I had students like as young as 5 that were just nuts and crazy and didn't want to be there. And then I had 64-year-olds that were going to take over the world with their new martial arts skills. So I had like the range, and they would often show up in the same class. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a great challenge. I am an introvert though, so that was hard to deal with. And I really had to push that a lot more when I started teaching English to international students in university. I did the same thing Josh did. That's where we met, actually. And I mean, that was hard. It was a lot of fun, though, because they were so eager to learn. They had to learn. They had to know English. They had to know these cultural things I was teaching them. And they would ask questions about the craziest things that I'm like, I guess not everybody knows that. I guess not everybody does that. I mean, of course not. So it was really cool. So when we moved to China after we got married in university, so when we moved to China after graduation, it was kind of a similar thing times 50 because my classes were between 30 and 50 students, same as Josh. And it was hard. It was a lot more performing because I had to project my voice. I had big body language. I had to like teach. And that was super different than any other teaching I had done before or really any sense. We've been teaching English online through WaiGuo Friends English, and it's different because you're doing one-on-one teaching. You don't have to be as big and crazy. So yeah, it was different and a really special time in our development as teachers.
And it's because as teachers, we're also a little different, right? That I tend to be more heavily focused on the cultural side of things and how you change the way you speak when you're in different situations. So like if you're in a gas station or petrol station, you're going to act differently than when you're with your best friend. And your English is actually going to be different. And I love that. And I relish that, being able to communicate that. Yeah, it's so fun for me. But you are a little different.
I'm more the grammar person. I love the puzzle of language. Every language has a puzzle, and the way it goes together is different. You can take the same words in a sentence, and depending on how you arrange them or how you emphasize them, communicates different things. So to me, that is just the coolest thing. I nerd out over grammar, but I'm also an introvert. So when I'm doing grammar, the ball's kind of in my court because, I mean, I have a job, I have something specific to do. So it's different.
And I feel like part of that is because of your history with language specifically, language learning.
Yeah. Over the past 10 years, I've studied 2 other languages. I started with ancient Greek in university. I did 3 years of ancient Greek via the translation grammar method or grammar translation method. It was involved just reading and writing, basically translating ancient texts. That was the whole goal. There was no speaking and listening. There was no like talking to one another awkwardly in another language. There was none of that because really nobody knows how they pronounced it back then. So really, I would just take a text and I could go from English to Greek or Greek to English. That's what I did. But when it came to Mandarin while living in China, that was a completely different ballgame because I lived there. I needed to survive. I needed to order food. I needed to buy groceries. I needed to be able to shop and communicate. And online shopping was a whole different beast altogether. Like shopping on Taobao was, that was a chore. But it's just one of those things is I had to learn on the ball. And I had a different experience with Mandarin than you did because I did not go to the formal classes. We had our son while we were in China, so I didn't have the availability really to just go to classes. Instead, I just listened and kept up as I went. And my Chinese got to be high beginner to low intermediate, but it was purely just learning from being there. It was not at all studying. And Josh has a different language learning story as far as that goes.
Your Chinese was basically survival Chinese, right? Is that being able to see, identify, and use the things that are immediately around you.
Right. Well, and I picked up the grammar some too because I like grammar already.
Right.
So that was different.
But for me, I actually started similarly to her because I started with high school Spanish. And I took 3 years of that and I really did not like it. I thought I would never use it in my life. I thought everything about the class was, I'm not going to say a waste of time, but it was very difficult for me. There was a learning curve. And then on top of that, there was a kind of motivation curve. And both of those were pretty steep for me. But when I went to university, what was really interesting is I kind of got a taste of my own medicine because we did grammar translation method for ancient Hebrew. And so I learned a lot of the same principles and used a lot of the same tools to try to learn this ancient language. And I did.
But you needed it to graduate. That's why you did.
Right. I had to do it then. And I wanted to. It was interesting, but it was hard. And so when we moved to China, it was very different because I was immersed in the language. I was immersed in the culture. There was really, with the exception of our house, there was really no getting away from the language. And I actually really loved that. I loved the challenge to be able to talk to people, to see how they move their faces and how they change their voices and what space does and all that stuff. I loved it. I loved every little bit of it. And I thrived. And also I had a little bit of the added pressure because she was pregnant and I wanted to be able to hopefully provide a little bit and language-wise if something happened at 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't want to call like a student saying, hey, can you help me? Please. So for me, I had a different motivation and a stronger motivation, and I was able to have those class times. Yes. And we learned a lot, not only about teaching, not only about English, but also about language learning in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And when all of this experience comes together, it comes together in the WaiGuo Friends English's philosophy and the way we teach here. We teach as language learners. Okay, not only are we teachers that have done the formal side of things, but we've also been in that position of being super awkward, being laughed at for saying things wrong, being told that we're stupid because we can't communicate well. I mean, we know what that feels like. And we also know what it's like to be given a book that's like 30 years old and told to learn the language. We also know what it's like to just have tons and tons and tons and tons of content that you don't know what to deal with. like you just don't know what to do with it because there's just too much. Where do you start? And so WaiGuo Friends English, a lot of what we do is focused on a communicative method. We focus on adding things like grammar, but in small doses, because you don't need to have perfect grammar in order to communicate. The goal of language is to communicate. And so communication is a mix of your body language and the words that you speak and the way that you speak those words and your grammar and just culture and how that is taken in a culture. And so we want to combine all of these things together. But it's a lot going on.
Yeah, because I mean, like you said, language is a tool. It's a tool for communication, and communication is between two people, whether they're halfway around the world or right next door. The point of language is to bridge a gap and have interaction, meaningful interaction with another person. And for us, the goal of WaiGuo Friends is to basically be able to give you guys the ability to not only get more tools, but to sharpen the ones you have. We can dig a hole with a blunt shovel, but if we can sharpen the shovel, then we save time and energy, and that's the point.
Yeah.
I still remember our first Chinese tutor, and I can still remember her voice in my ear and what I learned in those classes, because having that input, having those tools given to me, even at such a early language age, so to speak, it was really meaningful, and it was really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And so we just want to be able to give these tools, but also give them in a constructive way that makes sense. One of the things that was really frustrating about learning via free methods is that there's a lot out there and it all comes in different orders. And a lot of what's out there for free is from people that don't know what it's like to learn English or just learn another language in general. And that's very, very frustrating. So we want to bring the expertise of being teachers in different settings and different types, but we also want to bring the English language learner side. We want to bring the language learner side to the situation, just be able to present something that is actually useful and functional and effective and efficient.
Right. So because it's a lot about time. When you learn a language, it takes a long time. And as much as some kind of self-help books, so to speak, try to help you, expedite the process of learning a language, we know that language does take time.
It takes so much time.
Mandarin is supposedly, we've heard from our very good friends that it takes up to 10 years. 10 years studying the language to be fluent.
That's insane.
I would say that's a pretty good ballpark estimate, because my goal in learning Chinese was, first of all, to help you, but second of all was to argue with an IE, which is the word for like a kind of a middle-aged woman in China, to argue with an IE and win. And I never got to that point. 4 years later, I never got to that point.
Had you been fluent, would you get to that point?
It would be less difficult. That's honestly, I've heard that as a better definition for fluency than being able to pass a test, because it's not about passing a test. You can research a book, you can memorize a book, and you can pass a test, but the goal of language is not to pass a test, it's to communicate to another person.
For sure.
And if you do it the communicative method, then you will be also able to pass the test. If you do the grammar translation method, you may pass the test, but you may not know anything.
Right. You may not actually be able to function in the society that you're training for.
Right.
So so far with WaiGuo Friends English, we have been working one-on-one with individuals, mainly adults and professionals who have a job. They're already living here. They're already working here. They can already speak English. However, they're finding that there's a lot of miscommunication between them and their American listeners, because they're not understanding nuances, or there are things that are going over their head. There's some idioms that they don't know. Maybe they need accent reduction, things like this. We've been working mainly with this grammar, just understanding meaning through grammar. So there's a few things like this that we've been working with thus far, and we will continue to add content towards that goal. But we also want to just really integrate and really ingrain into this business that good English comes with good practice.
And good community.
Good community. That's what I mean, is practice in community. Our tagline is better English together. And it's because you need the community of English language learners to work together with. you need to keep each other accountable to your studies and your practice. You need somebody that's going to kick you in the butt when you don't do the work that you're supposed to do, or if you're not practicing every day just by speaking. Um, it's the same thing with all kinds of aspects. We work to give you the tools, but we also want to give you feedback. That was one of the big things that we were missing so much as language learners, is we didn't always have feedback from somebody who actually knew what they were talking about. We would be given the sheets and the work and the practice, and we'd be given all this stuff, but sometimes the feedback that we got was like, you sound really dumb, or you didn't say that right, and then they walk on. It's like, no, I need the feedback. Tell me what I did wrong, tell me how to say it right, and then I can practice it again. So that's one of the things that we want to be able to provide is feedback, but we also want to foster a community of English language learners so you can help each other, but we can also give you feedback.
Right. And that's a big thing with any language, and any language learning is not so much that you learn from one expert, but that you get lots of different input.
Yeah.
Being able to kind of diversify, or make a broader audience or broader input for your language, makes for a better language.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea with WaiGuo Friends English, is that we have better English together because we have better language together. And so we are going to be cranking out more content for you guys, hopefully being able to have some way that we can foster more integration through other channels or other means, and just be able to give you guys more practice, because practice, like the saying goes, practice makes perfect, but community makes better. And so we hope to be able to give you guys the skills and the tools, and to be able to sharpen the tools you guys already have, so that you guys can have better English together.
For sure. So definitely stay tuned and keep an eye out for more videos. We're hoping to crank out 1 or 2 videos every week, just more and more consistent practice, and more stuff is coming down the line for 2022. So definitely, it was good to meet you guys. Please comment below, introduce yourselves. We would love to learn about you guys and learn who we're talking to, because if we know you, we can make content that's better driven for you. So, all right. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next time.